Chan.
Thanks, Aaron. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today, and welcome to our panel, Engaging and Converting Mobile Users. My name is Min Chan, and I manage our mobile business at Oversea. The goal of this panel today is really to share with you the latest insights and perspectives on the opportunities in mobile when it comes to traffic acquisition and monetization, as well as also to discuss sort of the challenges within the industry for you to keep in mind as you develop and refine your mobile strategies. So with that, let me introduce our panel of experts today. To my far left is Bardia Dejban, founder of Lole, a mobile strategy and development firm based out here in Los Angeles, and also our partner in the development of the domain sponsor app, which they did a tremendous job with. Next to him is Will Shu, founder of a startup accelerator, Mucker Lab, also based here in Santa Monica. Will and I used to be colleagues at AT&T Interactive, where he was the chief product officer there. And then finally, to my immediate left is Greg Sterling, internet analyst, renowned internet analyst. It's funny, we were joking before we came on stage how I should introduce him, and I asked him if it was okay if I introduce him as Internet God, and he said no. But
the expectations would be high in the audience.
But he does have a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge in this area. So with that, let me start with you, Greg, in terms of the first question. Mark Zuckerberg just recently in Facebook's earnings call announced that Facebook is now a mobile company. I thought that was pretty interesting, because Facebook has always been traditionally a PC-first company, but I think more importantly, it really signals the potential of mobile itself. So, what do you see, sort of, where the growth areas in mobile are today, and opportunities there as well?
Well, I mean, just as a fundamental matter, everybody in the room has a smartphone. Many people have tablets. You've got a tablet in your hand. Yeah. So the fragmentation of the device universe is significant. I mean, more than a half of American mobile subscribers have smartphones. That number will continue to go up. The the consumer market for PCs is flat. So more and more of internet content is going to be accessed on these devices. So just the growth in terms of sheer user numbers. Also, engagement is very high on mobile devices, especially tablets. So time spent, different devices, virtually across the board content will be accessed on mobile as well as PC. So, we can get into the specifics, but that's sort of the high level answer to the question, is that continued mobile growth. Also, as a kind of final comment, just for this opening question, I would say that you really have to think about demographics too, because I have two daughters, 7 and 13, and the amount of time that they'll spend on PCs is going to be probably less than various mobile devices.
Yep. Agreed with you. Mary Meeker had her report just last year, I think in India, stating that mobile usage is actually exceeded desktop usage.
That's right. If you're talking about emerging markets, that's exactly right.
Yeah. Any specific areas within mobile products you think are opportunities? Do you think, because of the sort of the immediacy of the platform, the context-based awareness of the platform, what kind of verticals do you think it lends itself to well?
Well, there's a lot of data on engagement in different verticals. I mean, travel certainly, games, news, finance, restaurants and retail are big mobile categories. I mean, you really, when you think about mobile, you have to think about the user behavior, and you can generalize to some degree from your own behavior. What are you doing on these phones? You're in retail stores, you're checking prices, you're checking reviews, you're looking for restaurants, you're using maps, travel-related lookups. So those are some key areas, but really it's kind of almost an across-the-board phenomenon.
Great. So we know about the opportunities. I think there's definitely a lot of area for growth, continued growth in mobile, but there's also a lot of challenges. So Will, what do you see are sort of the current structural problems in mobile in terms of acquisition or monetization?
Well, the thing with mobile is that the eyeballs are rushing towards mobile, but all the basic infrastructures that you see on the PC side of the world, or really web side of the world, hasn't really caught up, right? So traditional kind of techniques around user acquisition, around monetization, simply does not work on mobile. And that's a huge problem as well as huge opportunity. A quick example is that we work with a lot of mobile application companies, and really the only thing that works for user acquisition is to go to Apple, beg their editorial team, and get featured. Right? That's by far the most effective way. Tapjoy works, but you're going to have an install rate to activation rate of less than 20% if you're lucky, right? Because it's just truly incentivized download. And ad networks are just way too expensive on a CPC or CPA basis. So on the acquisition side, which is super important, it's really a broken game. And that's why VCs have piled into companies that have somehow achieved the kind of unique once-in-a-lifetime product market fit of virality, and all piled into these $30 million rounds on these companies like Snapchat, right? But the rest of us, we got to figure our way out to kind of claw and grab our way into kind of the first 2 pages of the App Store, and then eventually build a business around there. On the monetization side, things like getting a little bit better, right? Obviously, advertising is about conversion and driving revenue. And on the mobile side of the house, it's much harder to fill out a form, so lead gen doesn't convert as well. It's really hard to buy something because the act of typing in a 16-digit credit card number is almost impossible on an iPhone, right? So as we continue to fix these problems with better mobile payment infrastructure, with more kind of lead gen friendly form factors around the web designs or the page designs, things will get better. But in the end, we're kind of really far away. I see kind of mobile monetization as the web kind of 1997-ish, right? This is the eras of 24/7 media rather than the era of ad networks today.
Do you see any areas of innovation within monetization that show potential?
Because EU IDs are so locked down, or eventually become pretty locked down, and cookies doesn't always work, especially on applications. The interesting things that in the mobile side of the house what people are working on is around using other identification factors, and usually multiple factor identification, to really track a user across multiple devices, right? Because most of the fidelity around the data is actually on the website, but the usage is on the mobile side. So if you really want to do great targeting, what you need to do is take data and be able to match that up from a mobile user to a web user, and take those information and target on the mobile side. And I continue to see a lot of innovation in this space, and the efficacies are still low, but it's trending in the right direction.
Got it. How about you, Greg? As you take a sip of your water, do you see any areas of innovation in terms of monetization or acquisition as well?
I think the ability to connect, we were talking about this earlier, the ability to connect web-related lookups or online lookups with, I'm going to cough, I'm anticipating a cough now, web lookups with offline transactions, where you get, you capture the data at the point of sale, is really interesting, and that will permit, there it was, all right, waiting for the aftershock.
Like a sneeze.
And that will permit different business models, right? When you're in the middle of a transaction, there are different things that you can do, and that's very interesting. So facilitating transactions, creating marketplaces, your Fetch app, for example, those are some very interesting things. Mobile payments is a really interesting area that will continue to gain traction. Right now there's a lot of noise and confusion in the market. To the point about monetization, I think calls are doing pretty well in mobile, because you've got a tangible lead, and people are willing to pay for a good call or pay a premium versus like a mobile banner CPM. So I think there's some interesting stuff. It's a different medium than the PC web. So those are just a couple of areas.
Now, this concept of using mobile as a gateway into sort of offline leads is pretty interesting, as we move from online leads to offline leads. What do you see that as an area of growth and opportunity in the next few years as well?
I think definitely, as Will was saying, though, there's a lag between the consumer behavior and then what the infrastructure is permitting. But I definitely think there's a lot of interesting activity around trying to track people as they move from into stores, as they show up in stores, as they respond to ads or incentives. And then a lot of analytics that come from that can be used for targeting. I mean, Facebook, this doesn't necessarily, it may or may not be relevant to this crowd, but it's really an interesting product that's reflective, I think, of a kind of online-offline opportunity. So Facebook has a product called Custom Audiences, where you can upload your customer list from a CRM database or wherever, and then they'll find those people online. So they'll find those exact people online. So you can, I mean, there's privacy safeguards, but you can basically segment your customers, upload your lists, and more or less find those people. And then they have a thing called lookalike audiences, which is a similar, finding similar people, and then you can target those people precisely, and that's both on PC and mobile. So there's that's a very interesting product that brings together the on and the offline, and I think that we're going to continue to see more playing with those, tracking people across platforms, tracking people into stores, using the analytics and the data you get from transactions or from their behavior and movements in the world. There's a really interesting going on here, but there's a very interesting now movement to take location data and use it to profile audiences. So you can figure out who's here at this particular time of day and make demographic and audience inferences and target audiences. And that's a very interesting innovation that's happening that's different from what's going on in the PC web.
So the rules of internet marketing are pretty much the same in mobile as well, just even more importantly in terms of tracking users and getting their data and profiles.
Well, it's very challenging to track users accurately, as Will was saying. But I think.
But the potential is definitely there.
Yeah, there's analogies, but then there's also distinctions. There are differences.
Okay, great. Great. I think that was a really great sort of a general insight and overview of where the market is. So for you, Bardia, what are the top verticals someone is looking to build a mobile app or a mobile product should consider from a customer acquisition perspective?
Sure. I'd like to answer that question actually in two parts, because there's two platforms. You have mobile web and you have native applications. And native applications, I'll kind of start with that one first. Those are the applications that a consumer can install onto their smartphone. Generally speaking, what we've noticed in the past 2.5, 3 years, for between $1 and $7, you can actually purchase a user from an ad network. There's some outliers to that, depending on if your service is niche, if it's high-end service. But that's the general kind of notion that we've been playing with. The issue isn't really buying users and acquiring traffic on native applications. It's getting them to come back. It's a term called engagement. And what engagement means to us is that user that you acquired, how often are they coming back and using the application? And when they do, how long do they use it for? I'm going to take a vertical that's pretty saturated right now, that's pretty well known, and everyone's talking about it. It's gaming and entertainment. These are companies like Zynga that are releasing games, and companies like EA that are launching native application games. In this space right now, it's really saturated and it's hard to compete. So as a small company, if I'm going to go compete against ad buys and try to purchase users, I'm going to have to be diligent and know when they're running their campaigns so that I'm not overbidding and I'm not spending way too much money. And there's some seasonality to this. And you could just get on a call with somebody in an ad network, and they'll kind of help you. They'll talk you through this process. Once in a while, they'll even help you and say, we have a big spend this week. We can't tell you who it is. I would recommend that you spend with us next week. We launched a game just 5 days ago. It's called Memory. It's a turn-based game. And what we're seeing with this game is we haven't spent any money on it yet in terms of acquisition. But that engagement is important to us. And the user that downloaded the app 5 days ago is using it 2 or 3 times. And when they're using it for 15 minutes. So I know if I put advertisements in this application, and I'm making maybe a nickel a day per user, that I can continually make money, and eventually that $1, $2 I spent for acquisition, I'll be able to recoup that in about 30 to 60 days. On the mobile web side, it's a little bit different strategy. Back at CitySearch, what we found was SEO and SEM campaigns drive almost all the traffic for local searches. I'm searching for a restaurant. I'm searching for the Hotel Miramar. If I land on my iPhone, if I land on a page that's not optimized for mobile web, that traffic bulks, it leaves. And what we found was as soon as we started optimizing those pages, as soon as we started putting in better placement, better graphics, better UI, we were getting an additional 3 or 4 clicks into the site. They weren't just leaving. and that turned into additional revenue.
So from a native app and a web app, mobile web app point of view, any preference or strategy around going after one first or the other?
Sure. In the past year, 2012, I'd say 85% of our portfolio, the applications we built, were native applications. The remaining 15% were mobile web. And I wish I could tell everybody to build native applications because we make more money. But really what it comes down to is the use case. How are people using them? A dentist, for example, it didn't make sense. A dentist office came to us and said, I would like a native application. Would you like appointments and scheduling? No, I just want to have an application where people can find me. And to me as a consumer, that didn't make sense. I'm going to go and find an app in the App Store for this dentist. I'm going to go download, install it. I'm going to find the address and phone number and call them. And then I'm going to get to a reservation. That sounds like a very long process versus a mobile website where they could search on Google, they click on a link, they get taken to the mobile website, and they can make a reservation right there. So these are some differences. On the native application side, there's a few questions you can ask yourself whether to build a native app, whether you have the need to build a native app. The first one is, do you have a loyal consumer base, a loyal customer base that's web-based, and 20% or more of that traffic is coming from iPhone? And you could use analytics packages to track that. Some companies, the magic number is 15% of my traffic is coming from an iPhone. That's a good key indicator to go build a native application. Kind of a second key indicator is, are you saving somebody time, or are you helping them waste time? And by what I mean by that is, are you creating an application, a utilitarian application, where you can get reminded and get reminders, or save some text for later, or a game, which is, I'm standing in line, I need to waste time, I have nothing else to do, I'm going to play a game.
Got it. Great. So how about you, Will? You interface with a lot of startups. What are you seeing in terms of sort of the hot verticals or hot products for mobile today?
I do want to help answer this question a little bit too. What we're seeing across the board is that mobile applications typically has 3 to 5 times the engagement of mobile apps, right? If you really think about it, there's an icon on the home screen, so people are more likely to click on it than remember a URL, so kind of obvious. But also, as they engage with the application, they also engage deeper because the experience is a lot more responsive, right? And we know, as from working Google, kind of evangelizing this, speed is key to driving engagement, right? So a lot of times, if you have a lot of audience and a big user base on the mobile side, one of the very best strategy for acquisition is actually to throw up a kind of an intercept when someone gets to the web landing page and then get them to download the app. Companies like Facebook and LinkedIn has made the living doing this, and because they're able to build a sizable user base through traditional internet techniques like SEM and SEO, and then they go out and build their mobile installation base using this kind of takeover technique. They no longer have to spend the $1 to $7 cost per install and potentially only 20% activation that you get on the mobile advertising front, right? So I see an increasing trend towards startups, even though their goal is to be a mobile company, to really start with the web because user acquisition is significantly cheaper and the friction is much, much less on the website. Now, on application front, on vertical front, I think Greg is right? That mobile is the first localized computing device, right? You don't bring a PC with you, right? And even a laptop, you kind of closed it, and only when you're at the coffee shop do you kind of open up your laptop. So I really do believe, even though from the venture investment perspective, local is no longer a hot investment category, we're really still in the first innings of kind of really figuring out what the new applications and use cases are for mobile and local applications. And that means connecting with the physical world, right? Because local really means analog, and that means what the phone is eventually creating is your gateway between your real life and your virtual life, right? And for now, too many applications view those walls as impervious to each other, and they really should be really a use case that people should explore.
That's interesting. Anything to add on that, Greg?
Well, I would go back to what Bardia was saying about the user experience and the improvements that CitySearch made and that produced higher engagement. So if you really don't have a site that's optimized for mobile for the mobile user experience, you're going to lose people. If you have a PC site, or if you're doing an ad campaign that has a PC landing page, it's just going to be very difficult to engage people. If your site loads very slowly, you really need to optimize that experience. Native apps are clearly not for everybody. There's a lot of friction, as Will was saying, in getting people to download them. Sometimes people download things and they abandon. So you really need to have a sense of whether or not your content, whether or not your site is going to be sufficiently rich and engaging to people to justify the investment. A lot of people just go out and buy, people used to just build apps because that was the cool thing, and it often doesn't work.
Any, along the mobile web front, any opinion on sort of responsive web design or made for mobile kind of designs?
Yeah, we're seeing from the technology standpoint, HTML5 with really fast loading kind of JavaScript in the background. Don't want to get too technical, but what happens is a lot of these websites that are mobile web with great design start breaking when the person's in the subway because they click the button. They're out of connectivity. And a native application, the UI won't break. It'll just might retry. You might see a spinner sitting there for a long time. On mobile websites, it'll just break. So your whole page goes away, half of it turns white. There's new technologies now to prevent that. So if you're going to go with that approach, make sure you start investigating things like jQuery and HTML5, or talk to tech people that know what those are.
Cool. Do people know what responsive web design is? I mean, some people don't.
I don't know. Maybe you can describe.
Well, I'm not. Bardia is probably the better person, or Will, than I. I mean, maybe it's worth saying 2 minutes on what it is, because not everybody knows. I mean, do people all know what responsive web design is? Who doesn't know? Who's willing to admit that they don't know? Okay, brave people. There are no stupid questions. All right. Okay. Why don't you?
All right.
Sure. It starts from the way that the user interface is laid out. The call to actions are actually in a position on a mobile device that makes sense. They're not in the high end of your thumb, not in the low end of your thumb. When you engage at call to action, you need to give feedback to the user that something's actually working. Like I said, the subway tunnel, a spinner, an indicator. A lot of sites depend on that little browser progress bar, which is sometimes hidden to go through. Some other parts of it is don't use heavyweight components. Flash obviously isn't ideal because it doesn't play on all the device types.
But it's also a strategy for designing for multiple screen sizes.
Yep.
So one of the big concerns that people have is that you've got this range of screen sizes now. The PC, the 10-inch iPad, the 7-inch iPad Mini or Nexus 7 or Kindle Fire, and then a range of smartphone sizes from the iPhone to the Galaxy Note 2. And there's no reason to believe that we're not going to still have more screens. And so one of the benefits of responsive web design, which many people are critical of, is that you design once and it accommodates that range of screen sizes to optimize the user experience regardless of the device that they're on. So that's at least from a high level, that's the chief benefit. But people are critical of it because of load times and other technical issues, and I can't get into that because I'm not a technical person.
And would you recommend one or the other?
Well, to somebody I mean, I've been in conference sessions where people have said responsive web design doesn't create the optimal mobile experience. It takes too long to load depending on the nature of the site and so on and so forth. But there are a lot of people who do it for convenience reasons and think, and Google likes it and so on. So I don't have a strong opinion because I'm just not well versed enough in the technical issues.
So we talked about sort of the overall state of mobile today, sort of the opportunities, the challenges, and also kind of touched upon sort of the key verticals and areas of growth. The next area I kind of want to get into is sort of when you've decided on what you want to build, right? How do you kind of ensure that, or try to position the product as best as you could for success? Bardia, why don't you start with that one?
We have a three-prong kind of test. The first is, does a mobile application, whether it's native or a mobile website, does it genuinely solve a problem? Because if it doesn't, you might not get the engagement that you were hoping for. Second is the design. There was probably some screenshots here that you saw for Fetch. that's something there was a mobile application on the screen prior to the panel, and it was beautiful. The design was gorgeous. You got to start thinking about those things. How do you want the UI laid out? How is it optimized for the user experience? And make sure you get some qualified professionals to help you with that. Third part, which we've iterated over a few times, is make it fast. Native, mobile web, both of them can be fast, and make sure that you're not keeping the user waiting for more than a couple seconds. Because usually the interactions that they're doing on this device is in between lines. It's in between meetings. It's sitting here in a conference. And 3 minutes, 2 minutes, total time from the time they get in and they want to get out.
Got it. How about you, Will? I mean, when a mobile app developer comes to you and you're helping them get off their feet, what areas do you ask them to kind of focus on?
I'll give a more market-driven answer. We are a big believer in the lean startup methodology, and the way that we practically implement it for mobile startups is the first thing you got to do is figure out a natural user acquisition channel that you can acquire maybe anywhere between 500 to 5,000 users. And what you want to do is space out your development cycle in 2 to 4 week chunks and acquire a cohort user, test out the application, acquire another cohort user, test out the application. And what you really want to do is figure out if there's any virality within your application, right? Especially in product and services where monetization is still unknown. And a lot of times in order for you to gain scale, that's what you really have to do. So that means outside of getting money from Sandhill, you got to take your own back pocket and invest in user acquisition. Or you can figure out how you can create virality within your mobile application, which is admittedly 1 out of 100 apps kind of figure that out, right? But if you can get there, then you want to iterate through that cycle until you get your K factor, as the viral nerds would call it, and figure out if you can generate an application that can actually acquire user on itself because you have such great product market fit. And the iteration cycle we tell our entrepreneurs is typically you probably iterate between 4 to 8 times before you even get close to what you believe is a number that can actually be optimized. We see 100 to 200% differences between the first iteration to the last iteration.
Got it. Anything to add there, Greg?
Well, I would just go back to a point about. I mean, I can't really speak to the factors that you just described about virality and lean startup methodology, but I think you can leverage your web traffic for user acquisition. I think that's a very important thing. I mean, another analogy is sort of the Super Bowl. I mean, a lot of people probably watch the Super Bowl. How many app references did you see in the Super Bowl? I mean, I think there was one that came at the end of the commercial for the Star Trek movie, yep. And it just flashed by. Now, most of those brands have apps, but they didn't promote them, right? They were wasting an opportunity, and I think that there's a lot of existing assets that you have, chiefly your web traffic, that can be used to promote an app or a mobile-optimized version of your site. And you really have to see your mobile presence as an extension of your web. If you've got domains and content on your domains that are useful, that offer utility to the consumer or entertainment, you can really extend that into the world with mobile. And tablets, is something we haven't really talked at length about, and that's an interesting kind of hybrid product where people are very heavily engaged with tablets, but it has a more PC-like dimension than a smartphone where you're just going to pull it out and quickly do something.
I agree. I think the tablet might actually save the mobile platform, right? Because significant amount of
Define save.
We'll create an actual monetization strategy for the rest of us. On the e-commerce is obviously a big category on the web, and it's a huge part of monetization for domains, for Google, for a lot of advertising, right? And on mobile, when it comes to a smartphone, it simply doesn't work. But on the iPad, people are engaging and they are buying, right? Because if you enter your credit card once on the website and you register on your iPad, all of a sudden it's a one-click buying experience, right? And because you can engage much deeply on an iPad touch experience, people are actually browsing more, searching more, exploring more, and really buying more. Fab is really the forerunner in kind of trying to make iPad the main shopping channel for its users. They do everything they can to get their users onto an iPad application. right, after they registered online. And if more and more e-tailers starts kind of go down this route, you will see the CPCs go up in e-commerce categories across mobile. Right? And for this room here, that's probably a 5 to 10x difference in the next 3 years.
That's interesting. So with yesterday, Google announcing the new AdWords enhanced campaign functionality, where they're lumping tablets and desktop together. Do we expect to see a growth in CPCs or an increase in CPCs because of this?
I think the short answer is yes, that's the expectation, and also that's why I think Google has done, in part why they've done what they've done, is to close the gap between mobile and PC cost per click. I think we'll see it play out. Many people are upset that now you can't target tablets separately, but we'll see what happens. I just wanted to say, final sort of statistic on this tablet conversation, and then we can talk more about the enhanced campaigns, is that I think one of the device tracking firms said in Q4, I think 1 in 3 PCs sold in Q4 was a tablet. I mean, so there's an expectation that tablets will outstrip PC sales very quickly in 2013. So, more people will have these devices perhaps than PCs. PC replacement cycles are not happening at the same level.
Yeah, I mean, 100 million iPads sold so far, and that's only going to continue to increase. Great. So, Will, back to you. Sort of, what do you think is, the current state of mobile ad networks? Is it just Google out there, or is it there's other opportunities in terms of other networks and exchanges that we can monetize on?
The mobile ad network world needs to be really split between, like Ari always says, between application and mobile web. On the mobile web front, the infrastructure and the technology and the incumbents, I think, will eventually continue to kind of own that space. But on the application side, given the lack of targeting capabilities, I think it will be a completely new kind of new entrance into the space. The thing that I see in the mobile side is we obviously have a huge problem, and we already talked about this, around targeting at data, right? Because mobile is not a reach device like TV, where you just want to get 99% reach, and you want every American to know that you have a new, dish soap out, right? But the other thing that really need to be figured out is the form factors for advertising on mobile, right? So far, we have translated takeovers and CPC ads and banner ads and moving into the mobile side of the world. On a form factor that is 2.5 inch by 3 inch, you either have a seriously tiny banner that no one will know what the hell's going on, or you have a takeover that really creates a really bad user experience and potentially impact your application's engagement metrics, right? And that's actually not a great trade-off. I don't know what the new format would be, and obviously companies like Twitter and Facebook is betting on a text-based stream format, but that certainly can't be used for every single mobile application or website out there. So there's a huge opportunity in kind of reinventing what that format might be for mobile. For now, I'm not smart enough to figure out what that might be.
I think video is a pretty viable, video pre-roll, video ads are pretty viable on these devices. I mean, people spend a lot of time watching video, even on smartphones. So I think that there's some good CPMs, and that's a pretty good user experience, generally speaking, if the video works, if it's not flash-based, et cetera. And I totally agree that some of the ad creative on display ads, banner ads, is terrible. So there's very mixed results with mobile display advertising.
I kind of wanted to add a note about choosing or selecting your monetization. If it's an ad network, whether it's video or animated images or static banners, full screen. A buddy of mine sent last week a map of the state of publishers, advertisers, ad networks, exchanges. And it looked like I was navigating a map of Disneyland. It's so complicated that you have to call and you have to ask people that know which networks to choose and how to use them to be able to navigate these. So I guess my only word of caution would be make sure you know what that ad network does, what that exchange does, what they're providing, and if it fits to your product model before you actually settle on them. Because you might be unhappy with your revenue unless you pick the right fit.
any recommendations on particular ad networks that have worked for you in the past, or any
Sure.
way, any strategy in terms of approaching them?
Sure. For kind of pre, mid, post-roll videos, there's M.M, and there's also Millennial Media. Those two have done really, really well. There's one company that we've been playing around with for about 2 months now. This is coming from, playing with Tapjoy and Google and all these the larger companies that have done really well in this space. And there's one company called Mopub. And what Mopub does is it's an aggregator. And they let you talk to iAd, they let you talk to 7 or 8 other ad networks. And they optimize your revenue based on the inventory and what that ad network's paying in real time. And that seems to be working out pretty good for us. There's a couple of competitors, but Mopub is really easy to manage yourself.
Got it. Coming from AT&T Interactive, what are your thoughts on local ad networks out there?
I think local advertising on mobile is obviously the biggest opportunity out there. Unfortunately, the structure of the industry hasn't gotten to the point where the challengers, the internet startups or the mobile startups in the space have gotten to any type of scale where they can actually fulfill the inventory that's out there. And then unfortunately, the incumbents that's in the space are all in more of a cash cow mode. So therefore, the ability to monetize and reach the SMBs will continue to deteriorate over the next 5 to 10 years. So I think we're in a little bit of a status quo moment around mobile and local advertising. And hopefully there will be larger companies growing out of the startups that's been born in the last 3-4 years that will eventually get to scale and be able to reach the SMBs, right? Because it's really not an inventory issue. It's an issue of how do you sell mobile advertising to your local dry cleaner? Now, a little bit of a example.
Some folks just don't tell them about it. They just deliver ads into mobile as another lead source without really talking about where those ads are going to appear. But there's also a national local opportunity. The Radio Shacks of the world, the Best Buys, Macy's, and all these guys that have, Jamba Juice and many franchise store, McDonald's, and that's a big opportunity. And a lot of those people have incentives to advertise locally. So we'll see a fair amount of that, I think.
And we should expect to see higher CPCs or CPMs from these local ads.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a premium. If you've got an app that does have some local content or context, there is premium inventory there that's available. There's YP, which is the AT&T Interactive. There's XAd. There's a company called MarchX, which has telephone-based advertising. There's CityGrid, which is the parent of CitySearch, another location-based ad network. And all the major ad networks, including Google, do have location-based ads, and some of those will command a premium. So there's a good opportunity there from a monetization standpoint.
Interesting. So are you seeing any any areas of innovation for when it comes to mobile advertising as well? We talked about the fact that some
Didn't you just
some
ask me
companies.
that question a little bit earlier?
No, that was a different
Okay.
question.
It was a different question.
We talked about how there's some mobile ad networks now that are tracking users who actually see the ad and going into the retail stores.
Right. So you're talking about innovation specifically around mobile advertising?
Yeah.
I mean, there's like the mobile web and native apps, there's this distinction between mobile marketing and mobile advertising. So there are push notifications that you may receive in apps or SMS. You can sign up for some sort of loyalty program, and you may get a text message that tells you, come into the store and receive a discount or something like that. So there's some interesting things going on around push notifications and geofencing, where people within a certain radius of a store get a message that they've opted in to receive. I think there's a lot more to be done there. The whole payments area, connecting online and offline at the point of sale, the data you get. We were talking about, many people have banking apps, and the banks are all getting into offering deals to you. So you go into the store, and then you get the benefit of the deal taken off of the credit card. And the bank and the provider see the data, your purchase history, the impact of that incentive on your visit to the store. And there's some really interesting stuff going on around there. There's privacy issues, obviously, that have to be addressed, but there is innovation there. So, as Will suggested, there's this whole area is immature, and I think we're going to see people start to take advantage of the capabilities of the mobile device, the presence awareness, the fact that you can see people move, the fact that you can you see people in stores, and that will factor into the business models. And it may not all look like advertising. It may not all be a media buy. We may see other kinds of things happen that are pretty interesting.
Got it. Bardia, what would you say we could expect to see in 2013 in terms of mobile? Any predictions there?
Sure. And generally speaking, you could see Microsoft taking a strong ground with Windows 8 Metro. This is their devices, and it could be the tablets that they're releasing now. They have two. There's an RT and a Pro, and there's also all the phones like Nokia and HTC, and they're brilliant phones, really greatly designed. I wouldn't dismiss them from your strategy when you're thinking about mobile plays. We're going to see some pretty cool things. They're activating about a million devices, and this includes desktop activations, but 1 million Windows 8 device registrations every week.
Wow.
So even if 10% of those are mobile, you could see they're on a pretty nice trajectory. What
do you think of BlackBerry? Should we pay attention to them too?
We did development for BlackBerry, and we kind of put them on the back burner for now. I'd be interested to see what they do with the devices and how the consumers give feedback on the devices before that becomes a mobile app play.
It's interesting because Microsoft and BlackBerry are kind of jockeying for the third ecosystem position. You've got Apple and Google, and then who's going to be the third one?
Yeah.
And there is some interest in the new device, at least in Canada and the UK. There's been some preliminary interest. So we'll see if it succeeds. If the Z10 or that's the new device doesn't work, then it's going to be clearly that Microsoft is going to be the third player. But there is some potential there for BlackBerry if they can keep improving this new touch screen device.
Yep. Do you think, have you seen it? Do you think it's going to do?
I've only seen pictures of it. I haven't held it in my hand. I mean, the early reviews that I've seen have indicated that it's a nice device, but there's nothing that really completely sets it apart from what's available on Android or the iPhone, and that may not be enough to expand their audience, but they may save some defectors. Some people who would abandon BlackBerry for the other phones, they may retain some of those people.
Got it.
BlackBerry actually had 2 touchscreen devices in the past 3 years.
But they've sucked.
But putting it gently, that's what they were. So this one's interesting because they're hoping to migrate all of the users that have a tactile keyboard, the keyboard that you could touch and feel, to one that's going to be visual. So it'd be interesting to see what happens.
As we were talking about sort of different operating systems and devices out there, for somebody who's looking to build an app for the first time, do you suggest going with Android or iPhone, or what are the operating system first?
Completely dependent on, so if it's an existing business model, take a look at your traffic. Where's it coming from? You can easily tell if it's coming from Apple, iOS, or from Android.
I would say that there are now more Android phones in the market.
Yeah.
The U.S. market is a little bit different than the rest of the world, but Android is the dominant smartphone operating system on a global basis. However, Apple users are more engaged and they spend money in ways that Android users don't. Most web traffic is still being driven by Apple devices. Mm-hmm. So there's a bit of a trade-off. You get more Android users, but more Apple devices are driving more traffic and more engagement and more revenue per user.
That's a really good point. It's not just about the volume of devices out there, but it's really about the engagement. It seems like iPhone is one.
And I would look at your analytics like Bardia is recommending and see what devices are generating your traffic, where they're coming from.
Yeah. The thing about Android is that typically on any type of conversion funnel, because Android has a much open ecosystem versus the closed iTunes App Store kind of infrastructure, you're going to get at least a 30 to 50% improvement on conversion. Right. So
in Android, you're saying?
In Android, yeah. So I would love it if Android actually has more market share, because acquisition costs will go down and you can create a more efficient funnel. And conversely, because people are actually spending money on acquisition, monetization will go up as well. So it's an interesting vicious cycle that we're a little bit in right now, because how close the Apple ecosystem is. But as that change and move towards more of an Android world, some of the kind of shortcomings of the mobile platform could potentially be addressed.
We should also mention, I mean, Bardia alluded to this, but there are alternative app stores to the iTunes and to Google Play. There are a number of app stores. and I'm blanking on their names right now.
Amazon.
Amazon.
Well, Amazon is an Android app store, but I mean, there are a number of
GetJar.
independent, Zylogic and GetJar and,
Yeah.
and Appalicious and, there are a number of them. And these are places to market your app and to get exposure, and some of them will allow pay for placement at the top of lists. And, they don't have as much traffic volume or as much reach as the Apple or Google stores, but they're another place to think about marketing your app if
That's
you
a
have
great
an
point.
app.
How about you, Will? What do you see in 2013 for mobile? What's the one biggest thing that we can expect to see?
The one big thing, geez. Hopefully I'm not invited back next year, right? So that way I can say whatever I want. I do see e-commerce as the first bowling pin to fall on mobile. And then I see lead gen coming second. And then I very much believe Twitter or Facebook will figure out something on the mobile side in the next 12 months that will generate significant revenue in the billions of dollars. For now, they'll probably, given the amount of traffic they have on their native applications, be focused purely on monetizing their own users. But they could open up that floodgate to the rest of us maybe by Q1 of next year.
Well, there was going to be a Facebook mobile ad network ad exchange that they put on hold that would presumably leverage their demographic and interest-based data and make it available to third parties. And that kind of thing could still happen, and that could be quite interesting because of the targeting that you would get access to.
Agree.
What do you mean when you said that you expect e-commerce and lead gen to fall?
I expect revenue generated from mobile e-commerce and mobile lead gen to start increasing close to the rate in which mobile is acquiring just eyeballs. Right? I think like most new platform, performance-based advertising needs to work first. In mobile, the world has kind of went upside down for a little bit, where the branded advertisers kind of piled into the medium first. But those dollars are not consistent enough, and they're not big enough, and they're not ROI-driven enough to really support the monetization of a platform. So really, for mobile to work, conversion-based businesses like lead gen and e-commerce need to work on mobile for mobile advertising to work. And I do believe people will figure out with a combination of user experience, with better platforms, with Apple getting that together, and then really around mobile payments.
Got it. And when you say sort of e-commerce and lead gen on mobile, are you talking about sort of the transactions happening on the mobile device, or are you talking about mobile as a gateway to the offline transactions?
I think the offline thing will take a little bit longer. This is purely online, right? So taking the fab model and moving it across the rest of the e-commerce landscape, taking kind of the lead gen affiliate marketing CPA type models and figuring out, I've already seen a couple, Gradient X is one of the companies here locally in LA trying to figure that out, trying to create a more mobile friendly lead gen user experience for lead gen type advertisers.
And I would just throw in calls again, because there is a calls market in mobile. Those calls can command a much higher advertising revenue for publishers, and there is there are sources of inventory out there today, and it's consistent with the user behavior. Click to call, and there are $50, $60, $70 per call. Costs
For lawyers or plumbers or
lawyers and insurance, and that revenue exists today.
Yeah. So aside from that, last question to you, Greg, is how about you? What's your prediction for mobile in 2013?
For 2013?
Yeah.
I just think more of what we've seen over the last couple of years, more device innovation and adoption, more migration of usage to mobile devices, fragmentation of the PC market. I mean, right now, Google Maps is more widely used on mobile than it is online. And I think in certain categories, we're seeing 20, 30, maybe even 50% of traffic coming from mobile devices. So I think that we'll just see those trends continue, and those trends precede some of the infrastructure and monetization innovation that Will and Bardia have been talking about. So just more adoption, more smartphones, more tablets as alternatives to PC for content access.
Just continued acceleration of mobile.
Yeah, and everybody's sort of being forced to figure it out now, being forced by the consumer behavior to deal with it in ways that they weren't in the past.
Great. Well, why don't we take this opportunity to open it up for questions? Anybody have questions? Yeah.
Yeah, you touched on it at the end, the click-to-call part, but it seems as a kind of a domain type of community here, we're wasting our traffic, type-in traffic on education, on lawyers, things like that, if it's going to a long form on a phone. Can you talk more about click-to-call and its effectiveness? If you filter out the type-in traffic and send it to a click-to-call solution?
Well, I mean, in terms of define effectiveness. Do you mean making money or the ability to deliver the advertiser a good lead?
Both of those, yeah.
Well, as I said, there is a lot of money for calls, and that money exists sort of independent of the form factor in which it's delivered. If you can deliver a 30-second or whatever the business rules are around a quality call, and there are several sources of those. I mentioned a couple of them: CityGrid and Marchex, and there's
YP.
what?
YP.
Yeah, YP is another click-to-call source. So the advertiser will pay a premium for those calls because they get somebody on the phone, they can close that person, whether it's a national advertiser in a call center or in some cases a local advertiser. There are business rules around those calls. They have to last for a certain amount of time, and you don't have the challenges of the form, the lengthy form lead gen issue on a mobile device. It just makes you press a button, the call is initiated, they're connected, and then the call duration triggers the payment. So I think it's an excellent solution for mobile monetization. It exists today, and you tap into these different. Some of these sources do have traffic quality requirements, so I don't know how that plays with your domains. I don't know if I answered the question.
You did, but it's, as a user of a smartphone as well, I rarely see it. And you would think you would see
Well, you see it on Google. Do a search on Google for a hotel, or
from a type-in standpoint. So you're not touching Google if you type in domain.
right. I know. I understand that.
Domain, and you never see click-to-call, and it seems to me it's a waste. You see a form, you close it, no one's using the form.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question in terms of, is there enough sort of call ad inventory out there? Is that a reason why we don't see it?
I think the only company right now that's syndicating to domain parking companies around click-to-call is Marchex, right? Given everybody knows their background, right? Companies like YP and CitySearch and Yext.
Xad also has click-to-call, I think.
Xad haven't really tapped into this community at all. I think we'll leave it up to Gene and Ming to figure out how to get that affiliate feed, but they know who they need to call.
Yeah. Thanks for the plug.
No problem.
Well, CityGrid does do that click-to-call as well, but what you're going to have to do is, whatever the landing is on that web page, it's going to have to be modified to show a CityGrid profile or a Yellow Pages profile that pertains to that particular domain. I don't know if the domain is just a series of advertisements or if it's actually a functioning domain with a business model behind it.
I was referring to domains that are not built up.
Yeah, so
Domain traffic.
the lander would need to be changed to show a profile or profiles from businesses that support click-to-call, and that's how you would generate revenue.
Yeah.
And you could do this through Yellow Pages, SmartChecks, or CityGrid Media.
I mean, some of the display advertising that you see, I mean, the Google AdSense network, or display network as it's now called, has some click-to-call inventory. I don't know what the rules are around who gets access to that. But I mean, I agree with you that often you don't see it, but I have seen it. I have seen it in just my travels around the mobile web and apps and things. So it does exist. Marchex may be your only source, though, for
Domainers, yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how to promote an app? I mean, you mentioned getting featured in the iPhone store is, the holy grail, if you will. But how about, SEO for the iPhone store, meaning to try to get, when people search the iPhone store, have your app there. So what are some other acquisition strategies north of doing it from your own traffic on your own site that can be effective? And
Sure.
mainly the iPhone store being one way.
Well, starting with just the basic, you can get a press release out, and you can have it syndicated on Associated Press. You can have bloggers pick that. You'll probably get an additional 1,000 to 2,000 downloads that way. You can pay ad networks for the acquisition cost. That's called pay per download or pay per performance. That's usually $1 to $7. I have seen that as high as $35, depending on the business model. What Will was mentioning before is called a web traffic to native app conversion strategy. And what that means is from Google, I get to your page, and you might have a website. And what you're going to end up doing is you're going to have a banner at the top of the website. Apple has something called a Smart App Banner. There's a lot of companies that you can also input their SDK there. But a banner pops up. Now you've converted that SEO traffic. They can tap that link. They can install the application.
Apple App Store, SEO, like good strategies to show up in the App Store when someone searches a keyword related to your brand.
Yeah, there's 2 or 3 companies that specialize just in that, and I think you pay them monthly, but nobody's figured out the science perfectly.
What about this app of the day kind of burst concept that affects rankings?
Yeah,
and stuff?
they're a partner of ours. We're actually using them at the end of this month, and usually, it's a $15,000 to $25,000 spend, and they're giving you a user base of 2 million users, and it's going to be within a 3-day period. And if it's hit or miss, you might end up getting 50,000 users, you might end up getting 10,000 users. Those seem to be working very well.
And your activation rate could potentially be very, very low on things that's more incentivized or free apps of the day. So really be careful. I think the days of VCs funding companies based on the number of downloads are over. They're really looking at activation numbers as well as engagement numbers. The problem with the App Store SEO is that Apple just doesn't provide enough data for you to do any type of true analysis that you need, right? So this is really like the Google search engine 5 years ago, right? Without Overture having the keyword tool, right? You just can't know much about what's going on.
You can do SEO for your app in web search. That's one thing you can do. I'm not an SEO expert, but you should think about, Bardia alluded to this, you should think about a wide range of strategies to expose your app. Not just trying to get placement in the app stores. People, traditional marketing and PR methods, word of mouth drives a lot of app downloads. Lots of your website, blogging, so on and so forth. There are a lot of ways that people find out about apps.
And if you're a gaming or entertainment application, think about working with a publisher. One thing that does work is publishers that have a big install base of different games, they can cross-promote pretty effectively, right? And typically they'll take between 30 to 70% of the revenue. But what that gets you is an install base for your first game, and maybe the second game or the second application, you can just cross-promote through your own destination, and you don't have to give up your 30 to 70%.
Will, you also previously mentioned sort of building the product with viral features in
Yep.
it as well. That's probably one of the
Yep.
most interesting ways, yeah.
Yeah, we definitely leverage Facebook, Twitter, and don't forget about SMS.
Got it. Next question?
Is it possible to specify from which mobile devices you would like to buy clicks? Because I'm a manufacturer and seller of an extremely high-end product, and I think if you buy clicks from expensive devices rather than from cheap ones, you have an advantage. Because if you buy them from devices that cost a lot to purchase, you're more likely to get into the customers that are interested in high-end products. And if you go and buy clicks from very inexpensive devices, you're mostly dealing maybe with bottom feeders, that doesn't pay off.
Right.
So is it possible to specify from which kind of devices you would like to buy?
Yes. The short answer is yes. You can specify the version of the operating system. If you go through iAds now, you can actually tell them I want the 64 gigabyte model of the iPad, and they'll do their best to make sure that happens.
Which company would be that?
That's iAds. That's Apple's advertising agency.
IS.
How about on Google, Greg?
Google used to give you that option until yesterday, basically, where you could do granular device targeting, and they're really essentially eliminating that capability. Maybe if there's an outcry sufficiently loud, they'll bring some of that back. But I think the device targeting is pretty widespread in the mobile display networks.
Yeah.
with maybe varying degrees of precision.
It's technically possible. It's up to the ad network to decide.
That's what I liked about iAds is, you're already getting a high quality product, and they don't have an interface like Google. You actually have to call somebody, so you have to explain to them exactly what you want, and they do a really good job making sure that you're happy with that. And you're paying a premium for that traffic.
Great. Last question.
Greg, you talked a little bit about conversion tracking from online to offline, like retail storefronts, things like that. What are the challenges, or is it Google that's implementing that, or are there other companies?
Well, there are a lot of companies that are working on it.
Okay.
You just interested generally in what's going on, or did you have a more specific question?
What is the main challenge with doing it, or what's the status of it in terms of where they're at with it?
Well, whether it's the web or a mobile phone, the challenge is that when somebody does a lookup online and then disappears and then shows up in a store and buys something. I mean, you look at do TV pricing, and then you find out where the Best Buy is, and you go into Best Buy and you buy it, and whoever that website was, if you weren't on the Best Buy site and you were signed in or something, they don't know, that the impact on that offline purchase is a matter of speculation. There are different ways to try and see sales lift, modeling sales lift if you're an online advertiser with an offline purchase. I think what you're seeing now, Google is trying to get people to sign into Chrome across devices. That's one way they can track people to some degree. Coupons and offers have been a way historically to track people, because you do have a point of sale interaction and you can sort of see a code, or some of these sort of 2.0 versions like we were talking about, where they deduct the value of the incentive from your card. If you're doing mobile payments, there's data there. So Facebook is working with a company called Datalogics to try and track offline behavior. There's a lot of sales data from the point of sale that people are trying to match with online information. So there's a lot of effort going on to try and connect the dots between the two. Calls are used as a proxy for offline transactions. Map lookups are used by some ad networks as a kind of proxy. If you do a hotel search and then you look for the location, they'll say, oh, that person is probably going to show up. There's monitoring of devices. Shopkick is a company that does mobile loyalty stuff with retailers. You have to interact with the app in the store in order to get the benefit of the incentives. So there's a lot of stuff going on, and I think we'll see much more innovation around that. Whether there'll be sort of one killer simple way to do this online to offline thing, I don't know if that's going to ever happen. But there's a lot more visibility that's coming, I think, in the next 12 to 24 months, notwithstanding privacy legislation that may mess it up for some people.
Thanks.
Great. Well, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all our experts on the panel, Greg, Will, and Bardia, and also to everyone. So with that, I'll turn it over to Aaron.
Thank you very much. Great panel discussion. Appreciate it. 2 housekeeping points. First of all, Bardia mentioned Millennial Media. We have Henry Tam this afternoon at 2 o'clock giving a presentation, so be sure to come back for that. Also, there